Welcome back. Now, the rand is buckling under the pressure of Trump's tariffs, and domestically, it's GNU jitters that are weighing on the local unit. The rand lost over 3% against the greenback last week and hit an 18-month low yesterday, with some analysts predicting it could crash to 22 rand to the dollar. RMB's John Cairns joins us with his outlook for the currency. John, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And as mentioned, the rand really under pressure, being dealt a double whammy here. We've got GNU jitters and Trump's trade policies. Just walk us through what you've made of the performance over the past few days, where we've seen it cross that 19 rand mark to the dollar.
Yeah, spot on. So two different pressures coming through on the rand. One is the concerns over the GNU, and the other is the global concerns over tariffs and global growth. It's quite hard to detangle the two effects, maybe 50-50, both effects contributing to the rand, dollar rand moving up to new record highs, and then euro rand particularly really under pressure as the dollar is also under pressure. We didn't expect the size of tariffs from President Trump, both locally and globally, and then we're seeing global risk off, and in that environment, the rand weakens. The question really now is whether on the global front, whether President Trump keeps to his tariffs or whether he negotiates or is negotiated downwards. That seems to be the market's core scenario. In that case, then the rand should be able to stabilize, even come back a bit. On the local front, obviously, it's around the GNU. Probably we are going to have to wait and see, but it may be a period of time before we get any clarity on that.
And I mean, when you look at the local unit's performance before this recent fallout, it has managed to hold up well against the dollar, but we've been seeing pressure against the pound and the euro. So what's the story here? Is it a story of a weaker dollar, or was it a story of a stronger rand?
So in the early part of the year, it was definitely a story of a weaker dollar. As you know, we started to get some weak US data from February into March. This was preceding the Trump issues. The dollar came under significant pressure, and so dollar rand moved down. That really was the weakness in the dollar rather than strength in the rand. But a broader question there was the resilience of the rand in general. So yes, it was the dollar weakness, but we had load shedding, we had the initial budget problems, we had Trump's executive order on South Africa, and the rand managed to shrug off all of that. But as we're discussing, obviously that's too large. Why was the rand so resilient? Probably because the GNU, probably because of high commodity prices feeding through into large trade surpluses, and of course our elevated yields. But in a world of risk off, none of those fundamentals mean very much, I'm afraid.
And let's stick with that weak dollar story for a bit. You know, we've known that tariffs usually boost the currency, but that hasn't been the case. I mean, I think there was an article I read that mentioned that the dollar's heading for lows last seen in 2008. What's been going on there? It also seems like the dollar is losing its safe haven appeal.
I wouldn't say that. I'd just rephrase that. The dollar's not losing its safe haven appeal. I think US markets are losing their exceptionalism. What we've had over the past few years is very strong US growth, well in excess of what's been seen in other advanced economies, high US interest rates, and unattractive alternative destinations, China and Europe. So we've had a period of US exceptionalism where capital has been flooding to US markets. US equities have done so well. I think what's happened is the shine has been lost there on the US exceptionalism. It's not to say the dollar's lost its safe haven status. I still think that very much is in play. But just as some of that exceptionalism come off, the dollar has been under pressure. And then going back to your initial point, yes, the broad expectations actually were that if and when President Trump went through with these aggressive tariffs, the dollar would actually appreciate. That hasn't been the case. The dollar's weakened, as we all know. Yep, it's fighting back a little bit at the moment, but we are in a much weaker dollar environment than we were just a few weeks ago. I wouldn't say the dollar's back to 2008 levels. We're still far off that. In fact, I'd still say the dollar is strong. It's just not quite as strong as it used to be.
All right. Now, you spoke about the rand's resilience, and I'd just like to get your analysis around how much a higher or a record gold prices have been, or rather have been a cushion to the rand.
Yeah, a very good point. So to your point, obviously gold has been doing extremely well. But that's actually more than compensated for weakness in some of our other export prices. We've seen coal and to a lesser extent iron ore prices come down. And then don't forget, of course, the very sharp decline in the oil price.
Yeah.
So the way we like to look at it, the terms of trade, export prices over import prices, despite significant worries over the global economy, our terms of trade have actually improved during this period. It's really gold and oil more than compensating for the others. And that does, it's a very interesting view because, you know, you go back to the basics, the rand fundamentals haven't weakened all that much, still getting just as much for our exports. Probably the commodity price movements it could even offset the decline in potential exports to the US. So in terms of trade commodity price movements for the moment, particularly gold, very much in favor of the rand. Again, I'll just emphasize in periods like this of risk aversion, fundamentals don't mean all that much. But of course, it does argue that on a longer term perspective, the rand is definitely oversold at these levels. That's not to say it's going to turn around necessarily anytime soon, but just that fair value is lower. And when the stresses abate, then the rand should be able to strengthen again.
And taking everything that we've talked about into account, where are you pegging the rand for the year? I mean, there have been expectations that the rand could even crash to 22 to the dollar. Have your expectations, have your outlooks changed with everything that's happened?
So yes, they have. The 22 to the dollar view, I think, would be contingent on two events. Perhaps you'd need both of them to get dollar rand that high. One would be a complete collapse of the GNU and a reformation of the government with some of the left-wing parties. That would create a lot of stress. And then from a global perspective, we really would have to have a continuation or even acceleration in the trade wars. Those two factors would put the rand under significant pressure. Neither of those are our core scenarios at this stage. We started the year with a $17.80 rand forecast for the end of the year. We're looking good for quite a while there. We still, as long as the global economy stabilizes, we still think the rand will appreciate from these very oversold levels. We haven't published a new number yet, but somewhere in the mid-18s would, at this stage, looks a more reasonable expectation.
John, thanks so much for your time and taking us through the analysis and what's been playing out when it comes to the currency front. That was John Cairns from RMB.